Hey everybody, and welcome back to part 6 of Science versus Atheism, entitled Facts. And I'm going to point out that this is the very last section before we get on to analyzing the article. And at that point, when we begin to discuss the article, my father's syntax becomes much more conversational, and the discussion becomes much more easy to follow. So if you can bear through one more textbook-sounding discussion, then we'll get going here. Facts. A fact is simply raw information or data. Facts are not true or false, right or wrong, good or bad, scientific or unscientific, correct or incorrect, valid or invalid, or anything other than simple, raw information. A statement about facts may be so, but the facts themselves are context-free, interpretation-free, and value-free. That is, a fact has no innate interpretation. Facts, as such, stand independent of all interpretive structures. Again, a fact is simply raw information. Much that is designated as fact is in reality only interpretation of fact in the context of a given conceptual structure, whether it be science or philosophy or religion or any other format. With this precision we note again that there is no such thing as a scientific fact, and any claim to such is a misrepresentation of both scientific and fact. To be sure, science seeks, assembles, and provides an interpretive structure to give subjective meaning to and to subjectively interrelate and provide interpretive networks for facts. That is exactly what science is designed to do, and without doing is not science. But the facts themselves are not scientific or anything else, only raw data. Likewise, there is no such thing as a true fact. A statement may or may not correctly describe facts and or associated interpretations, but it is the statement itself that is true or false, not what the statement is about, namely the facts. We are constantly inundated with facts. They flood our experiences and affect everything we say and do. We exist in an atmosphere of fact overload and are not even aware of most of the facts that overflow us. To make sense of it all, it is requisite that each person acquires interpretive structures. It is innate and part and parcel as to who and what we are. It is not possible to live sanely and with intelligence and not choose interpretive devices to deal with facts. How we see the world, that is, interpret its flood of facts, is largely a matter of the interpretive structures that we choose. It is in this that we make sense of our experiences and order the affairs of our lives. We are so deep into the interpretation of facts and giving them meaning that most of us are not even aware as to precisely what it is that is being done. Most are like the fish that is not aware of the water in which it swims. They are not aware of the difference between the facts that flood over them and the chosen interpretive tools that deal with a portion of this flood. Quote-unquote, facts don't lie is an example of this problem. They don't tell the truth either. They just are. Truths are statements of faithful interpretive representation of interactions and relationships concerning facts, but most lies are woven on an interpretive network of facts by injecting non-existent and or misrepresented connections. The difficulty here is discerning correct interpretations from incorrect ones. Discussion of this problem lies elsewhere. Seeing is believing is sometimes more accurately stated as believing is seeing. We tend to see only that which our chosen interpretive network indicates should be there. The theist sees and interprets the same raw facts much differently than does the anti-theist. The theist claims experiences that give a foothold outside one's self, namely with God. The anti-theist, in denying such a fulcrum, is left adrift without this leverage. They deny its existence, and thus they create their own non-theistic belief system, which is simply their self-created religion. That is, their own interpretive structure concerning the experiences or interaction with facts, of their existence. The theist testifies of their pertinent experiences as relating to the existence of God and God's influences in their life. The agnostic admits the possibility of such experience, but demurs making such interpretations. The atheist believes all such interpretations are incorrect. The anti-theist is an atheist with a missionary zeal to eradicate all theistic interpretations everywhere. In so doing, they are left to drift without anchor or purchase or foothold in the deep, vast, empty void of postmodernism. They live by the dim, flickering candle of their own conceited and negative denial. From the anchorless platform of anti-theism, there can be no justification for claiming that another person has not had certain experiences, or having had them, is misinterpreting them. Yet all atheism, especially anti-theism, is based on this negative perspective. Those who testify as to their experiences with the God of creation stand and exist in that light and are warmed with the peace that it brings. The anti-theist not only denies having had such experiences, they are making pronouncements as to the impossibility of anyone else having had them, as well as all that such experiences include. Yet they have no positive testimony against the existence of deity, only their own negative rejection of the testimony of others. Only their own concocted fallacious reasonings, inconsistent even with the standards of science and logic and reason, upon which they feign claim to justify their positions. They are truly as the blind who deny the testimonies of those with vision. God is not a theorem. His existence or non-existence, like that of trees mentioned earlier, is not contingent upon any reasoning system or philosophical conjectures or scientific theories that we might create on one side of the question or the other. Answers to questions concerning God, His works, His ways, lie outside the limitations of the processes of logic and science and philosophy. They, like all questions concerning existent things in the actual physical real world, are ascientific, illogical, and aphilosophical, and the resolution and answers concerning relevant questions thereto are the burden of each separate individual. We may testify one to another as to relevant experiences, but each person is required to find for themselves the answers. There are answers, but there are no devices in science or logic or reason or philosophy whereby these answers can be coerced by one person upon another. Each alone has the responsibility to obtain those answers for themselves. I'm going to jump in to provide some explanation here about what my father means when he says that God is not a theorem, along with his assertion that the existence of real-world phenomena cannot be proven. I've had to speak with him at some length in order to understand it myself. In the past, I've heard him say that you cannot prove the existence of anything in the real world, and that made no sense to me. I pictured it being very easy to prove the existence of any object, but you have to think much more precisely. It's a matter of understanding definitions. Let's take his example of trees. Say you have a tree in your front yard. How would you prove that to me? Would you send me a picture? If I were a proud skeptic, it would be very easy to dismiss that sort of evidence. How do I know that's your yard? The photo could have been doctored, the tree could have been green screened on there. It could easily be somebody else's tree. How are you going to prove to me the existence of that tree in your yard? Let's say you buy me a plane ticket, drag me to your house, provide documents showing me that you are who you say you are, the property belongs to you, and there's your tree standing before my eyes. Have you proven it to me then? The answer is no. You didn't prove it to me. I experienced it firsthand. See, the word proof implies that you have worked through a series of scientific hypotheses to a conclusion, and to prove that your theorem is valid, you give me the formula and I'm able to reproduce the same results. That process is not relevant to the existence of your tree. Like my father says, the only thing you can prove is a theorem. And when it comes to the existence of real-world phenomena, you either experience it firsthand or you believe the testimony of somebody who has experienced it firsthand. The existence of an object is not determined by scientific models. If there is a God, you either have first-hand experience with such a being, or you believe or disbelieve the testimony of somebody who claims to have had first-hand experience with such a being. Let's assume for just a moment that there actually is a God. Science would be just as impotent at disproving his existence as it is at disproving your existence. And then let's say that God doesn't exist, or that you don't exist. How would science prove that? It doesn't even compute. Now, what about unicorns and fairies? Well, As we've been saying, you either experience them firsthand or you don't. Point being, the testing of scientific models never comes into play with these questions. Hopefully I've given you something to ponder as far as this topic goes, but let's continue onward. That concludes facts. Now we're going to get on to self-evident truths, which is just a brief paragraph. Self-evident truths. Once a person has chosen a particular perspective from which to view and interpret facts, there will be certain relationships relative to that viewpoint that in time become crystal clear and, within that context, obvious. Such perspectives are context-dependent, and alternative interpretations will likely differ. If the individual is self-convinced that their viewpoint is the only correct one, then these crystal-clear perspectives become to them self-evident truths. There are very deep problems with this position. Such a point of view is context-dependent, and these self-evident truths are not only not self-evident, but from differing perspectives, not even necessarily correct. Moreover, the clarity may vary from one viewer to another from within the same perspective, thus are not even internally self-evident. Justification as to the use of the word truth requires accesses that lie outside both the scientific method and logic and reason. That is, truth is both ascientific and alogical. Thus, in precise use of language, there can be no legitimate claims of access to such things as truths, much less the existence of self-evident truths from within the contextual platforms of either science or logic and reason. And that concludes the introductory portion of my father's response to 15 Answers to Creationist Nonsense. The content that follows this will be my father's direct response, and it'll be much easier for the layman to parse. And I think a lot of what he has discussed up to this point will become easier to understand as he discusses the article. Thank you for listening.